Hey everybody, and welcome to another live stream of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, where you get a behind-the-scenes look at how we do what we do. You get to stick around with us and the questions that you ask all throughout this. And today we're actually not on Facebook, just having some technical issues with that, but we are on YouTube. So the questions you ask on YouTube, you will then be able to, or actually we'll take some time to answer them after the podcast. So you can tell that things are a little different here today. We have Pete with us.
Howdy, guys.
Pete is our product manager, racer for Cliff Bar, crit racer, very fast guy, also fast and good mountain biker. And we're going to kind of get into your riding history a bit today with one of the questions. So
guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Nate is not with us today this week, or I should say this week. So we get to kind of rib him, and that'll be kind of fun. So thanks for joining us, though. If you have questions, remember, just throw them in on YouTube. The best spot to join us, actually, for those questions, I take that back, is you can go to forum.trainerroad.com. And this episode already has a thread going live right there. Our producer, Ian, is throwing in different he's going to be throwing in links or different images about the things that we're talking about. You can answer questions there, and that's where we'll actually go first to answer any questions that you might have. So we're glad you're joining us, and with that, let's kick off the proper podcast. Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
And not our CEO, Nate Pearson. Instead, our product manager and resident fast crit guy, Pete Morris. How you doing?
Howdy, guys.
We are going to answer more of those cycling and triathlon-related questions that you've submitted at trainerroad.com/podcast. We're going to talk about a number of different items. You can join us live every week. We usually do this at Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And you can join us live in the Trainer Road forum, just forum.trainerroad.com. And you can ask any questions within there. You can see a live stream on YouTube, so you may not want to, but you can see us. And our producer, Ian, is always throwing in interactive links and everything else into that forum post, which is super helpful. So it's a good place to be. If you are listening to this after the fact, you can still head over to the forum there. You can still get more information from this episode, some cool interactive links, and see what other, podcast listeners are talking about. So speaking of the forum, that's a new launch for us, and it's blowing up. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to keep track of.
It is. I have to just limit myself to an hour a day, and even that's hard to cut off because there's a lot of questions that I actually do want to answer. So if I seem to be not as much of a presence as maybe Nate, it's not because I don't want to, it's because I have other things going. So
yep.
Not that he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an awesome place. People are there asking coaching questions, or just asking questions, general ones of other folks, talking about different things that are working for them. It's a cool place to learn how to get faster. So you can join us there. Another big release last week, Pete. We released the calendar.
We sure did.
And I guess we also pushed some updates to the calendar this week.
Yeah.
The main highlights of what we pushed, I guess one thing that we pushed is the ability to copy workouts, I believe, right?
Copy weeks.
Copy a week.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I could see using that, especially when you're like customizing something, or if you're even like, you're the person that piecemeals together a plan or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You can kind of copy that through, kind of like what you've been doing recently, how you've been kind of following like a similar process with, testing out a certain type of workout.
Yeah, it'll be a helpful little addition.
Yeah.
I was going to say, luckily they're just constantly rolling out. Like I promised, things are happening every morning, every afternoon. So keep an eye out, and more things will come. It's not going to slow down. It's going to keep coming.
We push updates every single day. So there are a lot of updates that you guys can catch up with on that. And you can tune in on the forum. You can see where everything is. You can see all those updates there. It's pretty cool to see. So we push those updates on all the different apps. You can find the features that we have. Check that out. The other thing that I want to talk about is the Trainer Road kits. We talked about that, how now people can get Trainer Road kits. And there was an error with the site that we're building that, or I should say Jackaroo was building the site and getting it all together. And for some reason, it wasn't displaying women's kits. However, they're now displaying, so they're up there. So if you need,
they were always available.
Yeah, they just
but now you can order them.
Yeah. So it should be all good there. If you have any questions on that, of course, just jump into the forum, and we'll be able to address those. Pricing updates also go into effect next week. And those will go into effect. So if you have an active Trainer Road subscription, you're locked in. and you're good. You don't have to worry about it.
Don't do anything.
Yeah.
Just keep it rolling.
Grandfathered in. We have folks that are still grandfathered in at the original prices when they first started. We don't change it on people. But if you're looking to sign up on the 8th, we'll have a pricing update that will move it to $15 a month or $129 a year. And that's from $12 a month prior to that, and $99 a year. So if you want to get in before then, I recommend it. With that, jumping kind of back to the forum and talking about next week, Chad, you and I and Nate, we're going to Kona for Ironman World Championships. We're going to be there for a week, more or less, close to a week. And we are going to be riding almost every day.
Yeah, an aerobic-based training camp.
Yeah. So this isn't like an officially sanctioned camp. We hereby forego all responsibility.
It's our own, and if you want to join us, please do.
Exactly right. But we're going to have rides, and we've actually posted links to the routes that we're going to ride and the meeting places that we're going to start from and end at, as well as kind of some information on the routes. It's going to be tons of fun, and if you are on the island that week, you should totally join us. If you're racing and don't want to join us because you're worried about riding in a group, we totally get that. If you are a person that's spectating, or if you're a person that's racing and just wants to join us, please do. We're going to have probably split these rides up, at least, if needs be. We'll have a group that might take an alternate route or slightly slower pace, and for those that really want to hammer it, we'll throw them with Nate, and Nate can tow them around. He can go fast. So... but we'll have these awesome routes, and then it looks like on Tuesday evening, probably the details will be in the forum later today, but looks like Tuesday evening, probably at 6:30, and we don't know the exact spot. Maybe Kona Brewing Company again. They seem to have a lot of good selections for drinks.
There's a good vibe there. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're gonna have a meetup. So if you are a Trainer Road podcast listener, Trainer Road user, or if you just want to get together with some good folks, we'll be doing that there in Kona as well. So. It'll be a good time. And I guess really quick, just talking about the race before we get into that, it's like wide open. I have no clue since Jan Frodeno's injured, right?
Yeah.
So he's not going to be there. We have Javier Gomez. We have Lionel Sanders saying that like he's flipping his whole plan upside down as of a week ago, and he's been doing 3/4 Ironmans like as training tests all the way up until even this week. He's either trolling the world at an incredible level, or he's actually just making some big changes. And then in the women's race, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to counter Daniela Reef. We'll see. But
we'll see. I need to catch up on who the contenders are. I haven't even done my homework yet.
It's going to be exciting stuff, man.
We've been keeping Chad hard at work, in case you guys haven't noticed.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And then just one more point before we start to jump into, I guess, kind of a question that we'll cover. But it's new bike week, dare I say, for me. I got 2 bikes. I built up one that I've wanted to build up for a long time, which is an aluminum Cannondale CAD 12. And it's kind of like my old classic car, so to speak. It's like all mechanical, rim brakes, but it's got a certain level of panache to it, right?
Yeah,
but
looks good.
Yeah, but then we built up the S-Works Venge, the new one. We don't have the handlebars yet. So,
and I don't have my bike just yet.
Yeah, you don't have yours, probably not for another month. They're back ordered still.
That's okay.
Just with the handlebars. The handlebars are back ordered too. But we built him up, and I'm sure Nate's going to gush on this bike, so I'm going to save it for Nate so then he can, because he's ridden his. But I really don't know if it's justifiable to not get an aero bike now at this point. Like, I don't feel any compromise. So it's kind of crazy. It's stiff.
You rode it for the first time yesterday, right?
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah. And part of it, and part of what I'm saying with this is so stiff, but it's not abusive. And I think that a lot of people don't, if you have a stiffer bike, you'll actually have the chance at hitting higher power numbers because there's less energy loss in the flex and the frame between your handlebars all the way down. You know what I mean? It's just more power into those
power
cranks.
Transfer, yeah.
And I feel like the peak power that I hit yesterday was a little high for where I should be usually compared to normal bikes. So and it just feels like any energy you put into the thing, it just goes forward. It doesn't get lost at all, which aero bikes have sometimes been a little bit flimsy.
Yeah, looking at your bike, it's just chunky, right? Like it's a chunky looking bike.
It is, right? Yeah, it's a little portly.
Yeah. So it makes sense that it takes what you put into it.
I'm sure Nate's going to gush on this one, so we'll let Nate talk more about it. But before we go into anything else, let's talk about the 24 hours in the Old Pueblo, the 24-hour endurance mountain bike race. We've had a ton of questions over a long time about endurance, even 24-hour mountain bike racing and team relay tactics and all that stuff. So we got into the race. I think it filled up in an hour and 50 minutes, I heard, something like that.
Or even less, like an hour and 12 or something.
It was really hard to get in.
Yeah.
So we're into the race, and it's almost the complete team here. We're just lacking Nate.
Yeah.
But this is the
slowest
team.
One.
Yeah, he's not here. We can say that. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, this course and then team racing with this like 24-hour format. Chad and I have actually done a 24-hour team race before.
Yeah, and it was definitely challenging in ways that were unexpected to us. The way we ran it, we learned from it. So we'll pull a lot of beneficial information from that. I won't say debacle, but it wasn't.
It did not go well.
It was hard. It was hard in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So the course route, this is different in the sense that, Chad, you and I did the Rockwell Relay, which now I believe it's changed
renamed.
names. Yeah, the Vision Relay, I think is what it's called. Yep. And that goes from Moab to St. George, Utah. So in that one, you're roving. You don't have like a camp or there's no laps. But 24 hours in the Old Pueblo, we have the luxury of having one spot. The RV doesn't have to move. Makes it way easier to sleep because sleeping in an RV is really hard. So that makes it logistically more simple. But it's mountain biking, and that's a little bit more complex on the equipment side of things. It's February in Arizona, which means that it could be really pleasant, 60, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, or it could be really cold and rainy. So we'll kind of see. But it's 16 miles, and it's 1,200 feet of climbing a lap.
That's not nothing.
That's not exactly.
Well put.
Yeah, and it's not flat. Looking at it, there's a decent amount of like 2-track-ish kind of sections, a good amount of single track. Not a whole lot of technicality to it in terms of like a bunch of slabs or anything else. However, toward the end, there is like one slab when you kind of drop into the main camp area. That's kind of like a technical spot. But this one, I feel like in some ways this is going to play to some of our strengths in the sense that it's like shorter laps. I know I do well on short laps, relatively short laps.
Hour.
Yeah.
70-ish minutes.
Yeah. And you do well on that too.
Yeah, I would much prefer an hour than 2 hours or half an hour even, right?
Yeah.
Like an hour is probably the sweet spot for me.
It is definitely the sweet spot.
Yeah, Howard Grotz did a lap last year in 54 minutes. So I don't think any of us are going to touch that.
No, we're banking on 70, 75-minute laps, I'm thinking.
Yeah, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, though, is the lap is well done to 24 hours in the Old Pueblo, because making a lap this long makes it seem like, I can actually push really hard on that whole lap, right? So that's when things get really tricky. Like, actually, can you do that?
Yeah.
Because if you're riding in our case, every 4.5 hours to 5 hours, you have to go out there and you have to ride for another hour. That's actually pretty tricky. That's going to add up.
Probably count on doing 5 laps each. I mean, we're not. Yeah, actually 5 laps is probably about right.
Yeah.
That's
so 5
That's
hard
6 hours.
hour plus efforts.
It's hard,
It's
man.
going to be.
It's really hard.
It'll be tricky.
And I know there are people that do this solo, and you're just way tougher and cooler than us. But
way.
But I guess let's think about a running order really quick, because this is one thing that I do feel is pretty important for this team sort of stuff. In the case of the Rockwell Relay or Vision Relay, we had, we actually had like legs that were different. In this case, you don't have to place a person because they're going to ride different terrain. You all ride the same terrain. But I still think order is important. Who do you think would be the best person to start us off to get us into a good position?
Probably you.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you, I was thinking. One of the two of us, right?
If depends how technical the climbing is. If it's technical climbing, you're a lot faster than I am. But if it's double track climbing.
Yeah. So why would you say that we're the ones to put first?
Just because we're not as worried about rubbing elbows for the first, however long it would be. It'd probably be, that's a lot because there's 100 teams, or I don't even know.
There's a lot of teams.
There's hundreds of teams, let's say. So if you're trying to get onto anything, you're going to be fighting for space for probably the first whole lap.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So it's, I guess, an aggressive rider, a rider that doesn't mind bumping and knows how to work their way through a pack pretty quickly if needed.
Yeah.
It has a Le Mans start to it, which means that our bikes are in position and then we have we in
which makes
bicycle
everything
shoes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think so, but yeah.
Not frantic at all. Super tidy.
So we run to our bikes and get on our bikes and then do the first lap. And then I don't know the specifics about exchanges. I guess we'll figure that out. But in some cases, you have to switch over a wristband, or in some cases you just have to enter a zone and the other one can take off. we'll find out how that goes. But who would you put? So would we be the first two, do you think? Or would we want to stagger?
Maybe stagger. I don't know. So that's the other thing is there's also, do we go singles or do you and I do a lap back to back to back to back? So you would do 2 laps in the first 4 hours and I would do 2 laps in the first 4 hours.
I feel like we should save that strategy for later until each of us has a lap under his belt. And then we can decide
how it's actually going to shake out.
Yeah.
What time does it start?
It starts at noon on Saturday, finishes at noon on Sunday. So we ride through the night. We're going to get to equipment in a bit.
Okay. I was going to say it also depends on who's more comfortable at night and during the day. And there's a lot more things to think about. But I don't know. I guess we should all, like Chad says, we should probably all ride a lap. Especially when you're fresh, it's not so bad. The first lap won't be bad at all.
It's
it's the fourth and fifth.
I mean, it gets really hard. Days in advance do we plan on arriving?
We plan on arriving on a Thursday.
Okay.
And then we're going to get our RV, and then we're going to head out, and then we're going to spend Friday checking out the course, relaxing, hanging out.
Do a pre-ride lap.
Yeah, check things out kind of, and just, equipment check. And then Friday we race. Saturday we race. So, and Saturday through the night on Sunday.
Okay.
I think that it would be good to put probably Nate last, so then we give Nate less traffic to deal with in the beginning, because that's like I feel like Nate would agree that that's a relative sticking point for him. He'd do better with an open track because a lot of this is like big power, right? Yeah. And Nate has big power, so he'd be able to, if he has a clear course, he'd really be in an advantageous position.
And all those carrots, right? Like Nate's a perfect carrot person, where if he has someone that he can see, he'll slowly
get him in,
bring him
off.
Back in. Yeah. So that's kind of perfect.
What do you think about intensity, Chad, for something like this? Like,
man, that's a tough one. I have a feeling we're going
to ride sweet spot stuff, like kind of around there.
I think even that's a little lofty. I think if we maybe push like 80-85% on the first laps and decide if we can pick it up from there, rather than shoot for something a little higher than we think is repeatable, and then just kind of descend into a more unpleasant experience as we work our way through the 24 hours.
It's funny, like you could I guess save a minute, let's say, on the first lap by going significantly harder.
And that minute will be costly.
Yes, because later on, as we discovered during this relay, when you get into a dark place in a 24-hour endurance race, you lose, like, we're talking
20
serious,
or 30 minutes.
serious chunks of time.
We started looking like bike riders at Rockwell and finished looking like we were new to the sport.
I seriously felt like I was new to the sport. Yeah.
There's a good especially if you go a little too hard, like at Peter Stetno's ride, I did the second segment as fast as anybody, and it took me like an hour longer to climb Mount Rose than it's ever taken in my whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I skipped it.
The early smart man. The early on efforts cause a huge huge debt. It's compounding interest on the debt, basically, right? Like, it's not just straight across stuff.
And I think especially with that first lap, like watching those people ride away from me, you can be like, that doesn't matter. That guy's gonna just blow
See you
up
soon.
so hard later.
Yeah.
So it'll be that controlled chaos, and controlled pace, wall fighting through people, like the free passes and things like that, where it's I don't know, it's gonna be crazy.
There will be way faster teams than us there, like way faster. So we're gonna be doing the corporate team challenge, I guess you could say. So we'll be in that side of things, but there will be teams that are so much faster than us.
Do you know how many teams that puts us up against?
I don't know, but for some reason I remember, I think last year there was something like 70 teams, maybe, something like that. So, and the teams can have a whole different number, or like you aren't required to have 4, for example. I think that it can shift and change.
79 corporate teams last
79 corporate teams.
And you can load it? Is there a limit on how many riders? Do we know?
It looks like more than 4 is possible.
Yeah, I think so.
Seems unfair. There should be a cap.
Yeah. I imagine there is. And I'm sure Todd Sadow, he's probably not listening to this now because he's busy putting on the Oz Trails, one of his Epic Rides races. But I'm sure he'll listen to this after the fact and let us know. But I'm sure there's got to be a cap to it. I guess, can we talk about the nutrition side of things? So we're going to have a person to come with us and be the person that takes care of making sure that, like, food's cooked and ready, that we have mechanical issues taken care of.
Chains are lubed.
Yeah, the beds are like cleaned, not full of junk, so then you can just plop down and take care of that. I'm planning on, I'm planning on taking a shower at least one time to kind of freshen myself up.
Probably save that for the later stages, but it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Like a couple fresh kits.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Yeah. Fresh socks, like that sort of stuff, like goes a long way when you change that over. It really, really helps.
More psychological than anything.
Yeah.
But in both cases.
Probably lots of backups, like backup shoes, backup pedals, backup seats. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen.
Yeah.
I think so.
Hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Let's put nutrition on hold then and talk about equipment. No. Let's do that. I like it. I think that with this too, the thing that we have to worry about, I mean, there is cacti off the edge of the trail, sharp, pointy plants that can puncture your tires. So we're all running tubeless. I think that it's smart for all of us to be running. We should run Stan's race sealant. That's the really thick stuff. Yeah, that it really does. It does a great job at clogging things if you leave it in there for too long, but it also is really good for making sure that, sidewall tears even can hold in pretty well. What bikes are we going to ride? I'm going to be riding my Yeti SB100. I think that this course wouldn't require full suspension, but I think on an endurance race like this, having a little bit of suspension can help, or a compliant hardtail is the same thing. Yeah. But the efficiency, I guess, is the main thing.
I think you'll feel so much better over 6 hours. Imagine doing a 6-hour ride on a hardtail versus a 6-hour ride on your full suspension. Yeah. Just think about the way you feel
afterwards. 3rd, 4th, 5th lap.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It starts to hurt.
I think it might be the way to go.
Yeah.
And it gets you out of trouble, right? I mean, or it saves you from some trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
Where like a hardtail, you just...
I'd like to nail this decision down well before. And I'm talking like in the next week or two, rather than agonize over it up until the final moment.
Because you've been toying with the concept of getting a short travel.
Too many bikes. I mean, he who has choice has torment, and I've got a lot of torment.
Yeah. So I think that the key bike is something with like 100, 120, something like that for travel. We don't need anything too aggressive, but just enough to keep things smooth and efficient. Like you said, 6 hours on a hardtail is a hard day.
It's a hard day.
Yeah, if you get some cushion on there, it can really help. Lights. Do you guys have lights?
I've got some pretty sweet ones, but I think with this, I would go like full bore and like have the battery pack on my bike and like the blaring turns it into daylight for 50 feet in front of me.
Vegas
basically
strip.
like a trophy truck light on your
that's
head.
Kind of what I'm thinking. Okay, a light bar on top of my helmet.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, like as soon as you crash, it's
hard to rebound.
It's hard to rebound. So I think I'll just do everything in my power to turn it into an easy mountain bike
err
ride
on the side of excess.
Yeah.
No, why not?
Right?
Yeah.
If we have an RV and we have spare battery packs and we just charge them, and like, I don't know, the thought of racing in the dark just doesn't seem like what I want to do.
No. What were the lights we used on Rockwell?
Yeah, we used the jet lights, RIP jet lights, RIP.
In business still?
They're out of business, and they're such good lights. They're so really good. The best lights. They'll last for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So we are totally fine on having them like for a lap on high. Mm-hmm. They charge really quickly with lithium-ion batteries. Seriously, like if you can find these things on eBay, they usually do not go for cheap because everybody wants them. They're made really well. It's just a tiny self-contained unit, and it's such a strong bulb. You don't need battery packs or anything. It mounts with a GoPro mount.
Yeah, like we use those on Rockwell, which means we were at one point, one of my downhills touched 45 miles an hour in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, if I didn't have those lights, there's no way I would have touched 45.
Right, yeah, exactly. I've done a good amount of mountain bike night riding, quite a lot of it. And I put my lights in 2 spots. I put one on my handlebars, and then I put one on my head.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I make sure that I have differing light levels on each of those. So the problem is if you have it on high on both, a lot of the time what it does is since you have light coming forward onto the trail, then light coming down onto the trail, it has a good way of making shadows completely disappear. So you lose depth. And sometimes what you think is a flat rock turns out to be not a flat rock. So what I usually do is I put the one on my bars on mid or low, and then I'll put the one on my head on high. And then that usually helps keep some of that depth perception and kind of give you that. So that's how I have those set up.
Smart.
And just GoPro mounts on the helmet is what I'll do probably. That's a clean setup.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll have any more jet lights, so we'll have to find some other options for you.
Yeah, I bet we can look around. I have some pretty bright Lesign lights too, so we'll see. We'll play with them.
Lesign Light in Motion. If you have suggestions on lights, you should go to forum.trainerroad.com and you should look at this episode and come in and let us know what you've used and liked. We'd be looking for something without battery packs because we want something to just be simple and clean, less prone to error. So a fully contained light would be ideal.
Yeah.
So then if it's raining or anything else, you don't have to have any worries with that. But that's like a key component for sure.
Yeah.
Layers. I'm going to be bringing like a wool base layer for sure, and lots of layers instead of heavy jackets, because
lots of layers.
This one is kind of like down for quite a while, and then it just kind of goes up for quite a while. And if you get sweaty and it's cold and it's at nighttime, and then it can be hard to kind of relax and get back down. So plan is to not sweat.
Yeah, being able to unzip on all the uphills to dry out before going back down the downhills is
assuming it's a dry day.
Yeah, or being wet the whole time.
Yeah, good point. Tires, I think I'm going to be running the Maxxis Aspen. It just rolls so incredibly fast.
Yep.
It's such a good tire.
I don't know why I'd go with anything else.
Yeah, maybe the Recon Race. I don't know if it's sandy there. I think the Recon Race might do a little better in sand, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll do some recon, and if you know, once again, jump into the forum and let us know.
Yeah, probably racier. I mean, you're going to be rolling so much in this race that.
Oh yeah,
and it's not right.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, it's not like we're riding loose, blown out Tahoe stuff, so we don't need really gnarly knobs, right?
It just rained though.
Yeah, it's true. Yes, it's good dirt. I guess other than that, the RV side of things, apparently, I think as the length of your RV increases, so does your donation to a local food bank, and it increases pretty substantially. So I think the messaging is clear. They want to help people, and they also really don't want you to have a long RV here because the space is limited. So we have to figure out how we're going to do that. But
I think between an RV and a canopy out front.
Yeah, that would be nice for sure. Man, we got to think about a canopy because flying down there, I don't know how we carry a canopy. I guess we could check a canopy.
You can check a canopy.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can do that. So not on carrying that through the airport. But yeah,
I'll take that one.
Nice, awesome. So I guess an RV though is key. I think like you don't have to do it with this, but for us that are, we're pansies, we're softies, and we're looking to have, a good overall experience and give us the best chance at
our own toilet, our own shower, and our 2 beds would be nice, and a kitchen.
Yeah, I think that we should have more than 2 beds because if you think about it, we have 4 riders, and if we have 4 riders at any point,
3 sleeping.
It'd be great to have 3 beds, so then we can have that taken care of. The other thing that I want to talk about with this, Chad, is like coming into an event like this, is it beneficial at all to do any sort of like nocturnal training? We've had that question before.
Yeah, that's funny, and I'm not prepped for it, but I am just now starting to read about sleep banking. So, and it's particularly germane. I didn't even really give it much thought in light of the topic we're going to discuss today, but I'll have more information on it as we draw closer.
Cool. One thing I was thinking of doing, and this is like, this is just if I have a Saturday that I can do this with, I will. But I was thinking of on a Saturday doing something, it's not 24 hours, but doing like a 12-hour where I basically just do an hour loop or like a 16-mile loop that has about 1,200 feet of climbing. And then I come back and I hang out for roughly whatever the time would be. And then I go out and I do it again and that sort of thing. But just for like 12 hours, mainly to just get my nutrition plan down, right? Because I want to feel like what I can eat and then how my energy levels maintain.
Yeah, I think nutrition will probably be the hardest thing to broach.
Yeah, because I'm not worried about the fitness side of things, like in terms of like going hard and taking a break. I don't need to replicate that. But I want to replicate at least a portion of it on the nutrition side because I want to get that down.
And see what you feel like. Like I think for me, the hardest thing is starting cold after a few hours. Like that feels the absolute worst to me. So I was thinking, and I would do the same thing, like some 2 or 3 a days, like on a Saturday or something.
Yeah.
And do an early morning one, do a lunchtime, and do an evening ride just to see what it feels like.
I like that idea a lot. 3 different workouts packed into the same day just to get a bit of a grasp on that.
Nothing too intense, just, but the point is...
Nothing too depleting.
Yep.
Yeah. Hopefully even mountain biking. I'll probably try to do it.
For sure.
3 mountain bike rides just because then you'll see, like, honestly, my upper body gets tired from mountain biking.
Oh, yeah.
Heck yeah. Yeah, your back.
Yeah, that's going to give out way before my legs.
Yeah.
I'm sure, especially during this ride. So.
Which is another reason to go full suspension.
Yeah, just another one. Looking like a new bike's in your future, Chad.
You want to go bike shopping, Chad?
Yeah. On the nutrition side, Pete, since this isn't going to be like all-out sprinting efforts, is this something? You have a degree in nutrition.
Yeah.
Is this something that you think we should be taking in more whole food? Like, and should we try to get that in right after we finish a ride?
Yeah, I would say since each one's over an hour, like for everyone but you, that's 1,000 calories, right?
Yep.
Like given for sure, especially mountain biking. So depleting 1,000 calories in an hour, like you better eat something real afterwards and taper off the food leading into your next lap, and hopefully I probably wouldn't hopefully not resort to real sugary stuff right in the first half is kind of where my brain goes, is first 12 hours, like until you need it in the nighttime, that sugar is going to burn you out. Depends. Everybody's a little different, but for me personally, if I start doing sugar early and a whole day thing, like it's gonna bite me in the end.
We have a good window between riders though, because if we're looking at let's just say hour laps, that's at least 3 hours before we have to go again, which means we get something into us, we can get it reasonably well digested as long as we don't go heavy on protein or fat, which why would you, or fiber for that matter. So I think that's actually going to work really well.
Yeah.
So some rice,
some real food, but quick
tamales,
digesting.
Rice, eggs. I mean, a little bit of fat because that's going to make you feel better. Carb heavy and something that tastes good, right? Like something you're going to want to eat right afterwards.
Are we should we be keeping conscious that like 4-to-1 ratio of for the recovery?
Yeah. I mean, everybody deals with recovery a little bit different. I think we should all play with it, and then then you're like, well, I'm going to take 1 scoop of rice, one scrambled egg and some soy sauce, right, to just get everything back moving again, and that's easy to eat. It'll feel good, and you'll be able to tell you ate something. So, but I bet we should play with it.
Hydration for sure. Like for me, I've noticed that a bottle, for an event like this and the intensity we're doing, I definitely want to make sure that I'm drinking at least 1 full bottle during that ride. At least. It's likely not going to be super hot.
Heat of the day, maybe 2.
Yeah.
And then as it gets cooler, probably maybe down to 1.
Nate will need to drink 4, as we know. Nate drinks
four
and we know
bottles.
And we know he'll be strictly carbohydrate when it comes to his food. There will be no protein, no fat.
Right. I think it's a good point. Hydration pack or bottles?
I'm going to go bottles. I like the weight on my bike more than on my back.
On your body,
and especially after 6 hours. Like a 6-hour backpack ride, again, is noticeable.
It's noticeable. Even a light pack becomes noticeable. Yeah, I wonder I think I'm just going to do bottles because it's not too long. I don't have to carry too much. And in a tall bottle, I can carry plenty to give me a little bit extra if I need. Probably a good idea to take in an electrolyte drink too instead of just water for sure with all that.
Yeah, and I would say err on the side of
high sodium.
High sodium, high electrolyte, and probably as soon as we're off the bike with that recovery meal, have a whole nother bottle of electrolyte because it's easy to catch yourself behind, especially even though it's going to be cool, you're just going to be sweating and going through all that pretty quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think that kind of covers it, right?
Who's going to be the fastest?
Ooh, that's a good question.
We'll have to
that. Can we start at the bottom?
Closer to.
Right?
That one's. I think Nate's gonna take that. I'm just joking, Nate. He's probably watching right now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
What's up, Nate?
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Nate's fast now.
Yeah, well, we'll see who's in what sort of shape at that time of year. I mean, we know Nate is typically pretty fast right about then.
That's true. That's his peak time, his natural peak.
Yeah.
It's February 14th.
So he could.
Exactly. Right there. Cool. So I think that covers it.
It's gonna be really fun.
It's going to be a blast. I can't wait for it.
I think it might be the most fun event for me ever.
Yeah, I was going to say this is the most excited winter training event I've ever had to get where I'm like, I have to ride. This is it. It's 24 hours of Old Pueblo.
I want people to get involved, podcast listeners here. If you jumped into the forum and you let us know what your running order would be and why, I think that would be pretty funny because then we could hear why you would play certain riders in certain spots. It'll be cool. And it's going to be interesting. I don't know how we'll do. I have zero bearing or expectation in terms of result. I just have no clue.
I've never even done
I
think the longest race I've ever done is like 5 hours or something. You know? And it's not even. I have no idea.
It's going to be different.
No idea.
With that, let's get into Kevin's question. He says, first off, let me start off by saying 5 stars for sure. Y'all have changed training for thousands and made everyone faster, including me. Awesome. Good to hear it, Kevin. He said, I wanted to say thank you for being so cool and letting me and my friends at the pizza place in Leadville on Friday night join you before the Leadville 100.
Okay.
Yeah. Good on you, Kevin. He says, congrats to Nate for the awesome finish, by the way. I told you at dinner that my goal was sub 10:30, and I did finish, but it was in 13:19. He then goes on to tell us, and I'm just going to summarize here, that he was hit by a car shortly before Leadville, and he had some knee issues, and then his pedal seized up on the bad knee side. Pretty rough day.
Yeah, it was a tough day.
Way to go on finishing through because that's really, really hard. He says, enough of the excuses, he says. I already signed up for the Rattler again. That's the Austin Rattler, which is a qualifier. He says, because I have unfinished business at Leadville. Sustained climbing is a weakness, and weight is a factor at 192 pounds. Believe it or not, I weighed 255 not that long ago and competed in powerlifting events, so it has been a long adventure losing weight. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I hope to show up in Leadville at 180 pounds next year. I live in the Houston area, so it is not like I can go out my back door and just do a 10-mile climb. So my question is, can you tell me some specific rides in Trainer Road that would help me become better prepared for Columbine, as this is where I lost my buckle? Feel free to look at my Trainer Road history for sure. I guess the concept of training for one specific climb.
Yeah, which I wouldn't concern myself with. You lost your buckle on Columbine because of the fatigue that accumulated by that point. Yes. It wasn't, excuse me, it wasn't one bad climb.
Yep. So
you don't need to get better at conquering that particular climb. You need to get better at lasting for 10 hours worth of work, 10 and a half in the case of your goal. One of the carryover effects, or one of the translatable effects of riding a trainer, is that it basically simulates a climb. I mean, it never relents. You have resistance all the way around the pedal stroke all the time. The only way you avoid it is by stopping pedaling. So you can't use your excuse for not having climbs, not being a good climber in terms of the sort of stress it exacts. The trainer handles that for you. And then beyond that, you just have to have big muscle endurance. And Nate's, again, a really good example of how beneficial the sweet spot approach is, in that that's all it's about, is an even split between, fuel sources, the type of muscle stress, the fact that you can do so much of it in training, handle so much of it on the race course itself. And that's it. You're just a little short on that. So, or you just push a little higher pace relative to what your actual muscle endurance would allow. And then you paid for it dearly on Columbine.
That's what I was going to point out. Kind of like you mentioned on Stetna's race, like you actually had a responsibility in Stetna's race to like shepherd people, right? Yeah. But no matter how fit you are, Kevin, if you go into a race and you've gassed yourself beforehand, it's going to be tough.
Doesn't matter.
I did the same thing.
Lose huge chunks of time.
Yeah.
And you can feel like you're going as hard as you possibly can, and you probably are, but you kind of lit the candle at both ends earlier.
Yeah.
And it will definitely be a difference, even 12 pounds. Like if I'm 12 pounds lighter, I climb so much faster.
It's a huge difference.
Huge difference. So I would say as you never aim for numbers, do all the things you can do, and you'll weigh what you weigh when you get to Leadville. Losing some weight will definitely it'll probably lop an hour off your Leadville time by losing 10% of your body weight, which is just crazy.
Huge impact.
No fitness increase at all.
Oh, yeah. We saw so many people come through that first aid station at Leadville, and they were firing. Like, they were, like, pinned, right?
Yeah.
And then by the time we got to the base of Columbine before they went up it, there was much less enthusiasm, right? And then by the time they came down Columbine, it was like you could see it in a lot of people's faces. How am I going to make it to the end? With a race like this, there's so many nerves, and you've worked so long for it, but you have to control yourself. You have to control your pacing. And you have to ride so much easier than you think, especially when you consider that you're at 10,000 feet. You have to ride so much easier than you think you need to. And it will pay off so much later on. And in the end, you're going to have a day that you enjoy. I know it feels like you're going slower and it's going to equal a slower time, but you're actually going faster, and it's going to make the day more enjoyable as well. It's your best chance at a PR.
It's your best chance. Start easier. Then go easy.
Like discouragingly low power. Yeah. I mean, you look at the power meter, or you look at the intended pace, and you think, I can't possibly need to go that slowly.
Yeah.
You do.
You do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is like a great example of people when they say that, like, I'm just a really bad climber, but a lot of the time, what you do leading up to that climb is what makes you, is what makes that climb so hard. So a lot of people are just as good. I see plenty of very savvy riders. In fact, Pete, you're an example of this. Like early season on the drop ride last year, like you were heavier, but you still had big power, but you were still able to hang on climbs, and you were able to hang on climbs because you were very wise with your effort earlier on.
Yeah, you just know that you can't get yourself into any trouble.
Yeah.
If there's already something hard coming up.
For sure.
Just pay attention.
And you have to familiarize yourself with that steady form of stress too. It's not on off. There's not even just a lot of people think they have good base fitness or good muscle endurance because they ride their bike a lot, but they do this whole more recreational, but even performance-oriented riders don't recognize how often they take a break from pedaling. Even if they just kind of let off the pedals a bit, but they're still turning the pedals over, that's restful. And that rest goes a long ways towards keeping you in it for longer rides. But when you're constantly pushing on a trainer or up a climb and there's just no breaks whatsoever, it takes a very different toll.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally different. Let's go into the next one from Eric. He says, I'm a new cyclist about 4 months, and I just finished my first goal race, the Hotter Than Hell 100, relying largely on Trainer Road. That's in Texas. That's a pretty tough one, I've heard.
Yeah, it's a hard race.
Yeah, he says, I'm building my ATP, which he means annual training plan, for the next year, building towards the same event next year. After giving myself some time off the trainer, that leaves about 48 weeks. So my plan is to do a low, mid, and high volume sweet spot based progression before going into any build and specialty phases. So I have 2 questions. Is it reasonable to do this, that pairing of a low, mid, and high volume progression, to control my fitness ramp rate and mental fatigue? He does mention that he was running about 600 TSS I should say a week going up into this event. Let's cover that one first, and then we can cover the rest.
Yeah, it's an unusual approach. The only reason it kind of works in this case is because of the differentiation between the low, mid, and high volume sweet spot plans. The low and mid are pretty similar to one another, but then the high volume plan shifts to strictly sweet spot work. I don't know that. Man, that's just a lot of focus on muscle endurance. I think there are better ways to dress things up and break up the training. We talk about this a lot, moving toward an event, having a lower level peak for that event, taking a bit of time off, some sort of refresher, and then moving toward a higher priority event. It just seems like, you're talking about stacking 36 weeks of base work end to end, and they're different loading cycles too. So whereas we typically do a 3 week load, 1 week deload, sort of, or 1 week recovery. The sweet spot plans go 5 on, 1 off, and that works early in the year when the intensity of the workouts is relatively low. But if you're going to do that one after the other, you're going to have to start to rearrange that stuff a bit, and it will become a bit complex. You're going to start to fold in the second half of these plans a bit of VO2 max work, and then it's going to go away when you repeat the first half of the plan. There's a lot of issues with it that I'm not super keen on. So I think I would still do a base build specialty cycle, or even base build specialty sort of approach.
I was just thinking, one thing to think of it is the high volume plan is so hard.
Oh,
it's so hard.
Yeah,
when I was 4 months in, I would ride 20 minutes up the hill, and that would be in 5 minutes back down, and that was my entire ride. Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I still raced but it's so hard to acclimate your body in, even though you'll be 8 or 10 months into training. High volume is for people who have trained years at 600 TSS.
And that high volume base plan, or sweet spot base plan in particular, I mean, those are 90 minute to 120 minute workouts, and there is very little downtime. So we're talking, I think it works up to like 3 by 20 minute intervals, 4 by 18, 6 by 15. I mean, that's a lot of time working at about 90% of your FTP day after day after day. I mean, there are a couple rest days in there a week, but you can do a lot of sweet spot work for a period of time. Not for 36 weeks.
It's extremely effective if you can absorb it.
Oh, yeah. And if you push yourself to a point where you can handle that sort of stress, I mean, the muscle endurance, the high level endurance you gain after something like that high volume plan, if you're an athlete who's fit enough to endure something like that, to actually absorb it, you're going to be a monster.
Yeah, huge benefits from it. The one thing, if you're particularly looking at building, now I know that this is like a longer race where it's not exactly, it's not like a crit where you're just sprinting nonstop. So perhaps that's why you're focusing on just that long of a base phase. If you really are stuck on making the base phase longer, would pairing traditional base and going into sweet spot base
that's always
be a
my
better
go-to.
option?
Just get some low-level long hours in a different manner, and it goes a long ways towards making you a better endurance athlete. Period. I mean, it's just a wider base. So you, and I know this that idea gets kicked around a lot. Wide base, higher peak. That's real. There's much truth to that. So build that wider base, but go about it in a less stressful manner for a while. And then shift into, because don't kid yourself, sweet spot is hard. It's hard on the body. It depletes your muscles. It's psychologically very demanding. So no way would I go back to back with that stuff. I'd be hesitant to go back to back with it. And even 24 weeks seems like way too much.
I really like the base build like you could do traditional base and then a build and then sweet spot base and then a build and then lead into your event.
Yeah,
and
that sounds really good.
You're going to feel better. Like your body's going to feel better. Your brain's going to feel better. It's just, like Chad was saying, 36 weeks is so long.
It's pretty tough.
And it might even sound good on paper to you. Not quite to me. Some aspects of it do, not a lot. But you get, I don't know, 12, 14 weeks into that, and you know you're not even halfway through it. The motivation is going to be so hard to come by.
Yeah, it'll get tough for sure. His second question, I'm just going to paraphrase it a bit, but he's basically asking how to best shorten a low-volume base plan to 9 weeks. So usually, or I should say a base phase, usually you'll go through 12 weeks of it, right? But in this case, he only has 9 weeks. So if you're to shorten the base phase, and let's just talk about this from a principled approach in general, if you're to shorten the base phase, which weeks do you want to cut, or which weeks would you cut?
Yeah, as always, it depends on what you're after. But the way those plans break down, you have, again, 5 weeks of loading before a week of recovery. And then the second half of that plan starts to fold in VO2 max work. So I'd probably base it on what I need more. Do I need to really establish my muscle endurance, or can I start chasing higher level aerobic gains, and then determine based on that which of the plans I'm going to chop 3 weeks off of.
I think, I'm assuming here, but since it's the low volume based plan, I assume it's the first one he's going to do, and so then you got to start off easy, right? Like just start off at the beginning and lop the last 3 weeks off. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to pull a Nate here. We've been talking a lot about this here in the office, let's just say.
Yeah.
And so we've been thinking about it a lot, and it always comes down to the type of rider you are, your kind of breadth of experience, and what you're trying to race for. And then you get to talk about what you want to cut out.
Yeah, and where you're starting. I mean, if you're coming into this, excuse me, if you're coming into this and you already have quite a lot of fitness, maybe you're coming off a cyclocross season or something like that, then you can truncate the plan to trim off some of that sweet spot work, because the muscle endurance is already firing on most, if not all, cylinders. So that would be a case for
the other way,
reversing what we just recommended.
Yeah, you probably don't want to cut the recovery week out of that one, right?
No, that's another thing. With 9 weeks, that makes that recovery week a little tricky. So you might do 4 on, then take a week off, then do 3 on, and then follow it with recovery week before you jump in. So you're going to have to shift your recovery week around a little bit, because just putting a single recovery week in the midst of that means you're going to finish at 9 weeks and then have to dive straight into another plan, which you're not going to want to do without a week of
For sure. That week is really important. Even though it may feel like you don't need one when you get to that point, you will feel like that eventually.
Especially if you're loading for 5 straight weeks.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you can do this now with our calendar, finally. Like you can push and pull these weeks up and down.
Truncate your own plans if you want.
Yeah.
Like take the first 9 weeks and lop the 9th week off, pull the 12th week, recovery week back down to the 9th week.
See what that does to your TSS chart.
It'll still look clean. I promise you'll feel better going into the build. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure. Griffin's question, he says, if everyone is following the same training plans, this is a bit of a theoretical, okay? Sure. If everyone is following the same training plans, how can someone who started cycling later in life, say their mid-20s, ever compete with someone who started training in their teens? He asks, will I just never be able to catch them, even with nutrition, rest, and recovery dialed in? Or would simply being tougher and pushing harder through workouts allow me to slowly gain some ground back? Although unlikely, as everyone always thinks there is no one that trains harder than them. That's true for everyone. There's no one that trains harder than me, right? That's what everyone thinks.
Everybody trains harder than me.
Nice. He says, also, any tips for trying to increase your ability to increase your TSS each week? Or is it simply just proper rest and recovery and a matter of not pushing it too much to avoid overtraining and just enjoying the slow increases your body slowly adapts? So I guess we can cover that last one later and perhaps intermingled with this, but Pete, you started pretty early. You used to race BMX, right, when you were a kid?
Never did? I'm a skateboarder, snowboarder that hurt himself, and then when I was 22, I found a bicycle, or 21, I found a bicycle.
There we go.
So I'm a late bloomer, right, I guess, technically, and I started with like the C's here in Reno, the 25-minute races.
You were dead slow too,
and I was really slow. I was not fast when I started, for sure. I was definitely behind the curve. And just slowly but surely, I probably bit off more than I could chew and started doing like the week-long training camps with the UNR team, and where you just go ride 600 miles because
bury yourself.
Yeah, you just buried yourself. And when you're young, when you're in your mid-20s, you can do that, and your body responds to it. And if you eat right and recover correctly, like you can load a lot of stress on your body, and you'll be okay. I would say one of the things that stuck out to me the most with this question is it's not really about if they train harder than you or if they're more naturally talented than you. Bike racing is one of the few things where the person who wants it the most has a better chance, right?
Yeah,
for real.
So it's not only, train hard, do everything you can, but when it comes to racing or whatever your event is, like you have to want it the most. You have to suffer the most, and that's the difference. It's most of the guys at the top level are all the same. It's the person who suffers the most that gets it.
Yeah. Chad, when did you start? What age did you start training for bike?
I rode BMX since I was a little kid. I didn't race, but my friends did. So I'd go to the track with them, and I'd kind of try to follow along. So I got a little exposure to it, but nothing that qualified as racing or conditioning, really. But a familiarity with being on a bike and turning pedals over a lot. I mean, that started when I was probably 5 years old and never stopped. There was never a gap. But I didn't start taking it seriously until I was about 18. So I don't consider myself a latecomer or an early bloomer.
Right.
I'm not sure what word I'm looking for there, but
yeah.
But I've had a lot of exposure to it, and the conditioning aspect of it started at a pretty young age. I mean, at 18, that set the stage for, being a fast masters rider, because I had, nearly 20 years of this sort of work in my legs, in my body.
Yeah, like time certainly does help. Like you can't ignore that, right?
It does, but I do want to make it clear that, Griffin, you can only ascend to a point. So regardless of when you started, the sooner you push up toward your genetic potential, the sooner you basically maxed out. It's not like that gap between you is going to always be there, because you're going to grow or improve at a rate faster than a more experienced, stronger rider is going to. When you get to a point where you're so close to what you can do based on, whatever limitations you're beset with, that your gains are going to be so hard fought. Getting a 1 or 2% bump in a 6-week training plan is going to be a big deal, whereas a newcomer can see a 10, 15, 20, 30% jump.
Yeah. I started when I was 24.
Okay. So you're perfect.
So yeah, I'm like in the middle, right? And I now, looking back, I don't know if other people have these thoughts, but I see people that join like at the local road race series or mountain bike series, and I see him racing in the seas, and I go, oh, he'll be with us in a year. You know what I mean? Like you can tell, like, and it's an athlete that wants it really bad, so they train enough. And then they learn enough to be able to execute well, and they get there. And you would think that, like, I'm 31 now, so you would think that, saying that person will ascend to our level in a year seems a bit crazy. But like you said, you kind of reach a point where the circumstances in your life limit your ability to grow, whether that's your physical abilities, whether that's the stress or different responsibilities you have in life. But you reach a point where you're capped, kind of, right? And then you can change that, of course. It's not like you're capped forever. Yeah. But in most cases, you kind of hit this point. And when you look at like local racing, it's kind of rare to see that one guy is substantially faster. In the majority of cases, you have a healthy group that's kind of toward the front, right? Maybe there's one person that's faster, but it's not like it's really strung out at the front. It's usually a group of people that are kind of at that level. So I feel like you don't have to think of yourself at a disadvantage. Maybe that helps you. Like you've got like the fader or the hater fighter attitude, like where you need to have some sort of opposition like that. But I think that you don't need to think of yourself at a disadvantage at all, especially in a sport like cycling when we're talking about endurance sport. Yeah. In different sports, when you're talking about like a lot of like pretty severe action sports, that's a different deal.
Yeah,
right?
that gap is not a hard set thing. It's not always going to be the gap between you. That gap's going to narrow, plain and simple. They can only progress at a certain rate, and you can progress at a faster rate. Again, there are certain things you'll come up against. Maybe this is a rider who can train 15, 20 hours a week, and you're a rider who can train 8 to 10. So some things will factor into it, but the fact is, given the same circumstances, you can probably ascend to the same heights they can. I mean, there's certainly a genetic component too that could limit you, but you won't know until you start to really get into it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So his question though about any tips trying to increase your ability to increase your TSS each week. And the first thing that comes to my mind is consistency. Building
durability, and I mean, that's kind of a term that's more commonly applied to running, whereas you have to strengthen connective tissues. But to a lesser extent, it definitely applies to riding. That's why sweet spot work or base period training is often referred to as training to train. You're trying to set a strong foundation in place so that you can do the harder stuff, so that you can escalate the training load without overdoing it, etc. But the ability to increase your TSS comes with a ton of consistency, and often enough, and I don't mean to sound discouraging, but we're talking years of it, not just a couple of tightly structured seasons or a season, but years to really push your body to the heights that it can actually reach as an endurance athlete.
Yeah, it takes a long time. And I've noticed when I look back at my training history and I'm looking at my, my training stress graph over time, I see that when I was most consistent, that's when my PRs started to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like that's when I see those FTP changes. That's when they were increasing. It's just consistency for me is a key thing. And when I don't mean that if you're 200, training stress points a week, that now next week just start always riding at 400. I mean,
just make it happen, because it doesn't.
Keep doing 200 for quite some time.
Yeah, if you were to look at a multi-year TSS chart, you would see, way back, 5 years ago, say you're a new rider 5 years ago, the training loads that would put you in a dark place come the end of that 3-week cycle are nowhere near, are so far below what you can do now. Over that multi-year trajectory, the stress that your body learns to handle, it's really quite amazing.
It compounds.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting. I mean, I hear this a lot with Olympic athletes, because they're working on like whether it's like a 16-year plan, an 8-year plan,
cycle,
a 4-year plan, where they're basically like, no, I don't have to set the world on fire this year. It's in 4 years, or it's in 8 years, or it's in 16 years,
they have
right?
a 4-year training cycle. I mean, they may be looking multiple Olympics ahead, in which case it becomes an 8, a 12, a 16, whatever.
Yeah.
But 4 years. So, we look at base build specialty. They're looking at year 1, 2, 3, 4. It's
substantial.
It's a gradual process.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else to add?
I would say one of the things is as a newer rider, you're going to be able to get pretty fast, and your future peaks will be higher. But you can get pretty fast at the beginning. You won't be able to hold on to it for as long. So if you feel like you're going really good and then you start really coming down from that, take the break and then come back and start again.
That's a proper warning, because you get riders, I mean, even the most seasoned riders, experienced riders get that a little bit of momentum, and they start to see, wow, I'm having a really good season. I'm going really well. And they just push it harder until the wheels come off the wagon. And then it's...
then they quit cycling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so definitely as soon as you start feeling like you're like, man, I've never been this fast. I'm doing great. And then if you feel that kind of degrading a little bit, take the break.
Pay attention to it.
You'll come back even faster if you take the break now, and in 3 months, or after 2 weeks off, you come back and start training again. It's what your body needs to do over and over and over, especially at the beginning.
It's cyclical, ebbs and flows. Just get used to that.
Absolutely. Kyle's question says, love the podcast. I try to watch every episode. Awesome. Doesn't just listen, he watches. I like that. You can watch it on YouTube. He says, great content and thank you for sharing. I'm wondering what you guys think is the best position for your head during an all-out sprint and or during a TT. I thought this is interesting looking at both of those scenarios. And then he mentions eyes always looking forward, of course. And I already, good job, good on you, Kyle, because I could already hear people coming with pitchforks for us talking about this one. But he says, is head down and relaxed better, or are aerodynamics improved when my head is upright and the helmet is more horizontal with the ground? This is definitely one to be answered by an aerodynamicist, right? But I think it's something that we can talk to, and especially Chad, you and I, we noticed how much head position mattered when we were in the wind tunnel.
Yeah, and you can just, learn through observation and watch. What just happened? The World Road Championships, and look at the best time trialists. And these guys are already so dialed in terms of their fit, but I can't count how many times I saw riders who are extremely aerodynamic already drop their head down and basically almost set their forehead on their bar extensions, which is risky. I'm not advocating it, but they recognize the benefit of that slightly, just that little bump of a helmet onto the hump in their back and dropping that down, and the difference it makes over the course of, in that case, a really long time trial.
Yeah, that's why you'll see, like, especially I think head forward people, and depending on your posture, depending on how you're built. Like you may be a more head up looking forward person. I'm not saying up as in just purely upright, but more looking forward rather than like a head down. And actually we'll have producer Ian put these in here, but Jonathan Castroviejo, he rides for Team Sky, and that guy has a balled up position on the bike, but he looks incredibly aerodynamic, and he has more of a head down position, but it's very aero. And what I mean head down, I mean like rotated forward and down.
His head's like Chad said, his forehead's touching his arm.
It would be very hard to see forward.
Yeah, that helmet's rolled as far back on his head as he can get it, and he is just barely catching the horizon with his eyes.
Yeah, so he doesn't use the Giro Arrowhead, and I say that helmet because it's got a very unique design to it. I believe that they use something from Casque, and it's a form of the Bambino. It may not even be a normal one, but he has the Bambino, which is kind of similar to like even the POC that I have, the Cerebel, that sort of thing.
With a snub tail.
Yeah, with a snub tail like that. And if you have that position, you kind of want to match the helmet that works with that. But you look at somebody like Rowan Dennis using the Giro Arrowhead. He has a much more head-looking forward position instead of looking down, and it works for him. The biggest thing, and I think that the answer that an aerodynamicist would give you, is that it depends on how you hold your body. And
limb length and obviously flexibility, being able to create power in a really closed position. I mean, there's certainly more factors to it than head position. But
what do you do, Pete?
I'm a head down, but
are we talking about time trials or sprints here?
Well,
let's talk about time trials.
I think they're different. Oh well, yeah. So for a time trial, I like to ride, so I never do time trials. Thank goodness.
For the one time trial,
I think you did one last year. Yeah. Two actually.
Two. Yeah. One was the Merckx TT though, which was way better.
Yeah.
that's just a breakaway. That's not a TT.
But I'm a head canted forward rider. My head's always down a little bit. I never just look straight ahead.
Right.
And so when my forearms are on the tops of my handlebars, I drop everything. But I'm a wide guy, so my head sort of gets swallowed by my shoulders and back and stuff. But I put more power out in that kind of super aggressive forward position. So that's where my body likes to be anyways. But working on that shrug for me is the biggest thing. If I can shrug my shoulders a little bit and get my head just embedded in my body a little more.
Just a tiny bit.
And it's like barely anything. But it's a conscious effort. That's a big, you can notice a quarter mile an hour, half mile an hour, something crazy for no extra effort other than scrunching your shoulders.
That's it. That's all it takes. Yeah. What about sprinting? I think the biggest thing with TTs, you can spot, right? And what I mean by spotting is keeping your eyes down, looking up, eyes down, looking up, that sort of thing to help facilitate that position. When you're sprinting, you should not be, you should be looking where you need to be. It's pretty scary.
Always. Yeah.
Otherwise, you can really get
no exceptions in a sprint.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if it's a solo sprint off the front, but a mass sprint.
Yeah.
And even sprinting, you just got to have your eyes up.
Yeah. So what do you do with your head when you sprint?
Well, I'm a sighter while I sprint because I put more power out. So I think one of the things to remember is with sprinting, you connect your handlebars through your upper body, right, to make like that perfect base for sprinting. And so it feels much easier to get a good solid connection when your head's down at looking at your stem. So I definitely start my sprint, you look and make sure hopefully for the next half a second nothing's in front of you. And start your sprint and wind up, and then as bad as it is, I sight, and then you can see if anybody's next to you or behind you or whatever, and how hard you need to go. So a lot of sprints are either as hard as you can possibly go, or kind of you just have to beat someone, right? So starting your sprint looking down, I think, is important, just because that's where the power comes from. But then once you're not going you can only go all out for those first couple seconds anyways, and then the rest is kind of that taper as you're coming off the power. So then you can pay attention a bit more. But I do think, I'm not going to recommend this, but if you find a powerful position wherever your head may be, you'll find you get a better few seconds of a kick on the beginning of your sprint.
Yep.
Sure. And I think I'd like to actually agree with you, but as a coach, I just can't advocate it. So what works best and what's safest are very different things in this case.
Yeah, because I do the same thing as Pete. I did it yesterday when I was sprinting, and I paid attention to it.
I think I'd probably do it too, because I'm usually glancing at my power meter to see what that first little 1 second generates.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which never fall into that trap, because you're not going to see it. Like, it always averages, and then, you miss it through. But
unless you have your peak power displayed, which...
I got it, yeah. Chad has peak power.
Chad just has a screen of maxes.
Yeah, just maxes. Little sticker that says you're beautiful below it. Yeah, exactly.
Little mirror.
Yeah, like with sprinting, I feel like when I'm looking, the biggest problem that I have with sprinting is that I get too high. And I think that that's a big first for beginners, I think hopping the back wheel is a big problem. And then I think being too high. And I've found side-by-side sprinting with some pretty fast riders in practice and not. We've mentioned him before, but he's a friend of the podcast and friend of Trainer Road, but Scott Waters, he's got a really big sprint on him. And I've noticed that the only way that I could ever compete with that is if I need to manage to keep my power where it was, but somehow manage to stay lower. And you look at somebody like, Caleb Ewan's an extreme example of this, but Cav is a good example of this, stays completely flat backed and low and is
really low. He
has this ability to kind of like crane his head perfectly forward, like perpendicular, Yeah. Kittle is the same way, right? He like has a head that's just like looking straight ahead the whole time. Perhaps they've trained that, but the big thing is you'll see with those guys, Kittle perhaps not so much, but they really focus on getting low, staying low with their body. And
it's a tricky balance to find too, because for a very short while, pretty much once, I tried that very forward, very low position, and I did exactly what you just described, which I hopped my rear wheel.
Yeah.
And that is a disconcerting occurrence. When that wheel jumps over to the side and all your weight's forward, that's a terrifying thing. So right there, I recognize that's obviously too far forward.
Yep.
So then I basically dialed it back from there. Ideally, you'd probably ease into something rather than jump to the furthest extreme. But, I made the mistake one time. Fortunately, it didn't cost me.
Yeah.
And I remedied it.
I think one thing is practice your sprints, right?
So
like you
much.
can fine tune it even yourself. You can try like a head low, a head medium, and a head high, or a body low, body medium, and body high. And if you look at your power, see what it feels like, and just do 100-meter sprints or 200-meter sprints on something very closed. Like at our local crit course,
safe.
There's no one driving around there, so you can just where 200 meters to go is, and it's a loop. So every 2 minutes you can do a sprint if you want. But you get way better at sprinting by practicing, and there's never a time where it doesn't help you. Always, eventually, a sprint will come down, and the better you are at it, the more confident you are. You're like, well, I've done hundreds of sprints this year. You're going to be so much better going into it, and you'll know that you're going to do low, medium, or high, or arms out or arms in or whatever. But practice, like it's definitely
this
one of
coming
those things.
from a criterium rider too, so someone where you are guaranteed to rely on that sprint at some point in time.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's also just good for you, right? As an athlete, as a person. When you actually do a 10-second all-out sprint.
Those maximal efforts go a long ways towards furthering all types of fitness.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to me to see a rider that looks, he looks like Tom Bonin, just perfectly smooth pedaling stroke, and then when they sprint, it's like, whoa, what happened? Like different rider, like it does not look clean, doesn't look stable. It can be a dangerous thing to go all out. And if you ride a mountain bike, especially, or a cross, like that you can't have really sloppy technique when you're trying to sprint because you don't have perfect traction. So big advocate for it. I think that it makes you more familiar with your limits on the bike, which can be helpful in plenty of different scenarios. So
if you're a mass start racer, you have to train your sprint at some point. I mean, the multi-sport athletes, time trial is no point. I mean, I won't say there's no point in it, but you're probably not going to have to employ it during an event.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone else, you got to work on it.
Yep. Final question is from Matt. And for those that are joining us on the live stream right now on the forum, please stick with us and we'll answer some questions that you've submitted. But Matt's question, he says, "Hi, fellas. Thanks for an entertaining and informative podcast. I've often seen pro riders warming up for stages or TTs on trainers wearing ice vests if it's hot out. Even with a fan, I tend to heat up the room, and at the end of longer or harder workouts, I'm pretty hot. Turns out ice vests are kind of expensive. Since I've never heard you talk about them, I wonder if they aren't all that useful in the context of a typical Trainer Road workout. Have any of you used an ice vest to stay cool on your Trainer Road workouts?" And he also asks any thoughts on using them in that context.
Yeah, so I can't remember the name of the company now. I think they're still in business, but maybe not, because I tried to get refills for the ice vest that they gave us. They gave, I think, a couple, 3 years back. And so just out of curiosity, I started using it. But then this was in workouts, high intensity workouts. And then I started using them for time trial warm-ups, which, I mean, this was in the middle of July, local stage race. Absolutely a huge advantage for sure. I mean, our biggest obstacle when it comes to, or one of our biggest obstacles, maybe the biggest, is thermal regulation, right? Trying to dedicate enough of our resources towards cooling the body while still doing a whole ton of work. And if you can circumvent or, siphon off some of that into, via a cooling vest and have the cooling vest basically do some of the cooling that you're not otherwise getting. And the only time you're going to wear these is in an indoor workout or a warm up anyway. No one's going to race in one of these things. That's unrealistic.
Yeah. I'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you? I mean, these vests in particular were a little odorous, I guess. I didn't really notice until Nate pointed it out, and then I noticed all the time. So it got to a point where I associated that smell with hard work and kind of a downward spiral.
Yeah, Pavlovian conditioning took
and I stopped using it, and I wish I still had it because I don't even know where it is now.
Yeah.
But this reminds me, I'm probably going to get another one because especially when we're doing our indoor workouts, you can only make the environment so cool. I mean, if you're already in a warm room, those fans, they might circulate the air a bit, and they're going to simulate some, or they'll give you some of the cooling effect you'd get if you were riding outdoors. But it's still, I mean, a warm room, even with fans, is still going to be limiting when it comes to high-intensity workouts, especially something like Sweet Spot, where it winds you up and you stay there for long periods of time, and your internal temperature just rises, which means your performance is just going to decline. So if you could, tailor or taper some of that via a cooling vest, I don't know why not.
Yeah, the obstacles with cooling vests, and there's something that in my past life, motocross, like it was a big thing for a while there in the motocross world. And I remember riders riding with them, and every one of those riders would have like an absolute meltdown in the race because remember, these are insulated vests. They do not breathe. So in many cases, it'd be really, if it had mesh against your body and it could allow airflow and somehow cool additionally to just allowing airflow, that would be amazing, but that's very difficult to do. So you'll see that a lot of vests, they don't breathe very well. So even though it may be cold, you're trapping in a lot of heat, you're trapping in a lot of sweat, and you're denying your body from evaporative cooling. So that's kind of the downside of using these. It's a catch-22.
Yeah, if you had 3 of them that your significant other brought you from the freezer every 20 minutes, I could see that
swap out. That's a good idea. Yeah. That would be tricky. But that's kind of the tricky part with that. Things that I've noticed on staying cool is so if your house has it, train in the basement. That's usually a good idea to do.
Or I used to train in the garage, but I would open the garage or and put my bike halfway outside.
Yep.
And when it's 30 degrees outside, it's amazing how good it feels.
It's great. Yeah. It feels amazing. Don't be afraid to open windows if it's cold outside. Please do so. It will help.
You'll heat up the room.
You'll be amazed at how good of a heater you are for that room.
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing that I've seen, and I think is a better option if you're really trying to cool off, and we've actually had somebody talk about this before on the podcast, but using ice-filled nylons. That's like you'll see a lot of like pro riders do, but they were mentioning, I believe that they lived in New York or Spain or somewhere where they didn't have AC and they had to train, and they were and they actually, I think in this case, they shared with us the fact that they had like insane amounts of nylons in the freezer, and they had their significant other just bring another set of nylons and drape it onto their back. And the ice melts, but it lets circulation through. When you're outside riding, that's actually a tactic you'll see employed regularly.
I use that pretty much any race that's over 85 degrees. I'll probably race with nylons with ice in it.
Sure.
As a bigger
Not on your legs.
Not on my legs. But it's nice. The water drips down. It's cold water.
Yeah.
You're kind of always getting that cooling effect from being damp. But as a big rider, like heat's always the biggest problem. If it's actually hot, that's what's going to diminish like overall performance for me.
Big surface area, a lot of work, which means a lot of heat. I mean,
Yeah. So I think cooling, always make sure your bottles have ice. Always make sure that you have more fan than you think you need. Don't put fans at opposing angles. We've heard people talk about putting them at the front and then another person at the back, and then you're basically in this stalemate.
Sitting in a vortex.
Yeah, you're just like in this like dead man zone. You're, I guess, no man's land,
Yep.
in between the two. So don't have opposing fans. Make sure that they are complementary in their direction. That's a really good tip there. Try to cool off your environment as much as possible, even if that's training in a dark, dank basement or outside or whatever else you need to do. But ice vest is kind of tricky. Somebody's going to come up with an ice vest that breathes really well and does that. Then who knows? Maybe someday it's going to be integrated into our kit. Yeah, maybe that's future stuff, but who knows?
Chad will have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone will send it to me. I'll use it. I'll try it.
That's right. With that, thanks everybody for submitting your questions. Once again, you can do so at trainerroad.com/podcast. Next week will be very irregular. We will not have a live podcast. However, we will have 4 to 5 podcasts maybe posted next week. So a lot of them, and they will be all from Kona. And they're going to be with athletes that have qualified for Kona, and we're going to talk to them about the unique circumstances in which they qualified. So it's going to be kind of cool to be able to get some firsthand looks at, for example, how one athlete was able to manage training while working night shifts going through the residency program, right? Another with a person who's qualified and been to Kona before, but another person, it's their first time and they have no clue what to expect, right? And
That's
so
amazing.
We'll go through all of this stuff. A huge amount of the Kona qualifiers have used Trainer Road. We're pretty surprised to see that. It's I guess surprised.
You're surprised.
Maybe is the bad. Yeah, maybe that's the bad word. It's kind of cool, I guess, is the main thing. It's just it's really cool for us to see this. So we're really looking forward to it. If you are not a triathlete and you're a road cyclist and you're a snobby roadie like the rest of us and you cringe every time you hear triathlon, let your guard down this week. Check out Kona. You are going to be thoroughly impressed by these athletes. It's absolutely phenomenal. Chances are you can't even ride a bike split in ideal circumstances downhill as fast as these riders will.
I can't believe a medical resident qualified for Kona.
I know.
That blows my mind.
Amazing, right? Yeah. And he does backflips on BMX bikes too. He's pretty impressive. So, you'll see.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can't
it's
wait.
pretty cool.
I'm excited.
Anyways, it's going to be a blast. So tune into that. For more information on this episode, you can go to forum.trainerroad.com and you can check it out. You'll see the episode title right there, and you'll be able to see all the images that producer Ian's been throwing in, which is a bunch of them. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Ian's on fire.
He's on fire. Look at that. So please check that out, and we'll see you in there. If you have any questions about what we do at Trainer Road or anything else, you can check it out at trainerroad.com. We appreciate you listening and sharing this podcast. We'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
All right, live stream stuff. Let's get into it. Oh, I need to go over to the forum. Actually, I'll take YouTube if you guys want to check out the forum. How about that? We'll divide and conquer. Getting over to it. If for those that are still on here, let us know how you're liking the forum interaction. We'd like to hear that. It seems like it's really good.
Yeah, post in the forum.
Yeah, we'd like to see that.
What topic am I looking for?
Okay, it'll be titled for this episode.
Hop.
All right. Somebody mentions, I'll try watching in the forums today. Awesome, Carlos. Good to hear. The YouTube video is embedded right in there, so that makes it nice and easy for you guys. Okay. Let's see. So much cap. Yes, all three of us are wearing caps. That's true. I need a haircut. That's why I'm doing it. Somebody's asking, what's Chad drinking? Oh, that's Nate. Nate's asking that. What's Chad drinking, he says?
Well, it was coffee and now it's water.
Sorry to
disappoint, buddy.
Sorry. Yeah. No morning beers over here. And then who has the best hat? Clearly Pete.
Yeah, clearly I won this one.
Yep. And bad hair day? Yes, it was a very bad hair day. Need a haircut.
Me too.
And my barber is out of town. So, okay. Let's skip ahead here. Yes, it is gray shirt day as well. Okay, Lars is asking, is there a test in TR for 1 minute, 5 minute, and 5 second power? I assume that's what he's talking about. So when I guess that you can go through and you can, I guess test that stuff. We don't have any test that's built up to be able to extract that data and present it for you.
No, you have to do the analysis yourself, but I did create them a while back based on Hunter Allen and Andy Coggin's protocol. I'm not sure who it belongs to, but it's if you just search for HA, H period, A period, that'll get you at least one of them.
Cool. And then the other way that you can do this too is by using the personal records chart.
Yep.
That's a really good way to do it. So because you can do it at very granular levels, right? And you can see exactly where it came from. So Lars, I would recommend checking out personal records within your Trainer Road account if you have one. If you don't, it's a feature where you're able to, it's super cool. You're able to pin it and pair it exactly like, let's say 1 minute. You can click right there. You can see every time you set a 1 minute PR for a given season, and you can define what those seasons are.
Assuming you've had bests recently.
Yep.
The better term to search on is test. You'll find all the tests that have the 30-second, 2 minute, 5 minute, 12-second, 1 minute, Alan Coggin power profile. But if you've done maximal efforts in recent history, then absolutely pluck your bests.
Somebody, Jared Mickle, he says, you might want to consider night vision in your run order. People with significant corrections and older riders may have a limitation on night riding, so should maybe schedule to do fewer dark laps. Yeah, there's kind of a theory with like this team 24-hour racing, that you basically like stack certain people in the first, 6 hours, change that running order the next 6 hours, change it again for the next 6 hours.
Sure.
Kind of do that sort of thing. I know I see pretty well at night. I don't know.
I do not.
You don't? Yeah.
No. I'm getting up there. I mean,
Chad, this won't even be like a 24-hour race. You'll just race at noon. You'll start us off, and then you'll wake up.
I think so.
You'll race for us again.
I think so. I think I'm going to go easy. I'm going to go hard, and then I'm going to go drink.
No, I want him to sleep from like 8 to 4, and then get up at 4, and then just like a normal day, Chad just like gets up and gets on the bike.
Yeah,
and he's like,
just
all right,
keeps going. Yeah. It just put down some burner laps, dude. They've got to be really fast laps to make up for it. Yeah. Let's see. So somebody says the fast parts are very twisty, where cornering and handling is key. So that'll be interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting stuff. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, Nate grew a beard. Yes, he did, and he also is getting stronger. Yeah. How do you gauge progress for someone who doesn't have access to a trainer or power meter? So I don't know if you're talking about how Trainer Road does that, because it's all power based on our end. It's all power. Even if you don't have a power meter, we can estimate it with virtual power on the trainer. But I guess off of that, let's assume that he's not asking how Trainer Road does it. How would you gauge progress for someone? You don't have any power data.
Courses, just timed courses. So if you have a typical climb, a typical loop, something of that nature, just if you're doing it in less time, you're getting faster.
Yeah.
You probably won't do it faster every time. It's one of those ones where you'll go faster sometimes and slower sometimes, but keep your current PR in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see. This one's for Chad. Chad, with you mentioning the fact that the high volume plan is different than the mid and low volume plans for Sweet Spot Base, have you considered, or is that something that you would want to change in the future, or was that intentionally done?
That's intentionally. If we're going to do that much indoor volume, that much training stress, it's kind of got to be I don't want to say watered down, but that is kind of where I'm going with it. You can't have a whole lot of high intensity woven into what's already a high training load. I mean, that's kind of the same idea with riders who go for 20 hours a week. They're not going to do 20 hours a week of VO2 max work. They're not going to do 20 hours a week of sweet spot work.
Oh,
They're going to do 20 hours a week of riding 60, maybe 70% of their threshold, and keeping the intensity down because the volume is so high.
Yeah,
and that's the same idea working here.
That's one of my favorite things is a lot of people will have more success with the mid volume plan than with the high volume plan.
Yeah, totally.
Think that as like that's the way it works. To try the mid volume plan and you'll have a lot of success. If you're constantly hungry and you're like, man, I wish I had more training, or I just feel good, I crush every single ride on the mid volume plan, then you can think about the high volume plan.
Yeah, if you are considering the high volume plan, you won't have to give it much thought, because you'll be a rider who knows I need that much stress in order to get faster, or I can handle that much stress without completely imploding.
Yeah, it's something that I see, like you said, Pete, if you want a better guarantee of success, that's the spot to do it. And we've always talked about, like, you can get in a hole and it's so hard to get out of a hole versus just being, maybe just slightly under what your total capacity is, but that's much more sustainable because life throws you curveballs.
And we've talked about block periodization. We talked about it last week, and that high volume plan is basically a sweet spot block, and it's a long one. I mean, we're talking 12 weeks or 2 5-week blocks of sweet spot.
Pretty tricky.
Work and not much else.
That can handle it.
Yeah, exactly. And he's the type of rider who you think might actually be able to benefit from something like that. Yeah. Most riders, it's just going to bury you. It's just going to crush your will to live.
It'll be pretty hard. Have you guys thought about having a support person or crew for 24 hours in Old Pueblo? Yeah, we definitely will have one person. But if there are other people that want to join, let us know, because that could be helpful to have more hands on deck for sure. Adding one aerobic session a week while doing sweet spot base. Is this a good way to keep or assist in maintaining peak power?
I don't know what effect it would really have on peak power so much as it allows you to escalate your volume a little bit, grow your training stress a little bit, and they can be really productive recovery rides if you keep the intensity low enough. I mean, all I'm reading these days is running, and the guys who run the fastest are the guys who know how to balance their hard days with easy days, and they still run on the easy days because they're adept enough to actually be able to run easy, which most of us cannot, myself included.
Running easy is called walking.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Exactly
running
right.
Is only hard. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
What's this easy run you talk about?
Exactly.
So if you can make that ride truly recovery and allow the adaptation that would otherwise happen if you were just sitting on the couch and making it legitimately easy, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Brian says forum is awesome. Good to hear. And then let's see. Cameron says, for late bloomer cyclist, how many years of consistent training, barring unexpected life events, would someone expect to start reaching 350 watts or greater FTP results? I'm starting at FTP of 200 at age 30. It's kind of hard to really say.
Yeah, a lot of athletes can adapt really quickly if they have any sort of background in sport. I mean, Pete came from skateboarding and snowboarding, which you think there's no way that's going to carry over to endurance riding, but there probably was some effect. I mean, the consistency, the fact that he did it all the time, there was absolutely some adaptation going on there that benefited him later. And then some people just adapt quickly. I mean, they can handle high amounts of training stress even at 30 years of age.
And so 350 is a big number for a lot of people. A lot of people will
huge.
never see 350.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge.
Right?
Yeah.
So
but if you're a 200-pound male with quite a bit of muscle mass, that might not even make you a very fast rider. I mean, it's still gonna be something, but the fact is 200 pound versus 150 pound versus 130 pound, that 350 watts means very different things.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, absolutely does.
I would say a good Nate and I did our first FTP test together in Chad's studio many years ago, and I think I was 245 when I started, and I'd ridden a little bit, but not, barely at all, right? And so I've gone from, I would say 245 to 400 is probably my best. So that's a big chunk, and I weighed the same during both of those tests, probably.
Do you remember your first FTP test, Chad? The result?
No, I have to think on that.
Yeah.
I do not.
I remember mine. So I was using virtual power at first, and I thought that it was 400 watts. And when we first met, I told you that, and you laughed at me, and I was like, oh.
Sorry, I probably could have handled that a little better.
Yeah, it's all right, yeah. But then after that, I actually used a smart trainer. Right after that, I borrowed one and used one, and I was 176 watts. 176.
How far you've come.
Yeah. So
but it is a multi-year deal, but just don't look at the end game. Just see where you're at and just try to get faster every year. Don't get so hung up on the fact that this is, what I said was not meant to be discouraging, that it's a multi-year process. Along the way, you're just going to be faster with, proper consistency and recovery and properly delivered and escalated training stress, etc.
And you can get close in not only a couple years,
True.
right? You'll get 2 years of consistent training. You'll get close to your maximum capacity.
Yeah, seriously. I don't want to put a number on it, but I'm gonna. Let's say you could get 90% as fast as you're gonna get in those first couple of years.
Yeah, you can make really big gains if the stars align and really able to train as much as you possibly can and recover well and all that stuff. Ben says, I just started a build program, so he's in the build phase, one of our training our training plans. After my mountain bike season, I'm wondering when I should fit in my weight training. So, Ben, I assume that you just jumped straight into build because you've got some other event coming up after a mountain bike season. I would usually advocate for somebody to drop down to sweet spot base again, or a base plan of some form, whether it be traditional or sweet spot, and then working their way back in. Because that kind of also affects where you would work in that weight training. The base phase makes it a lot easier to work in that weight training.
Exactly.
Build phase, I find it really hard to work in, significant, any sort of weight training that's going to be or I should say strength training that's like moving the needle. It's pretty tough to do.
Yeah, anything that veers toward metabolic stress. So, higher reps where you're actually depleting energy stores and not just doing couple repeats that are super high weight where you're more focused on activation and different energy stores that restore pretty quickly. It's a very hard thing to fold in. So just know that as the training stress on the bike goes up, the training stress in terms of strength training is going to have to go down.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a thread right now in the forum. I'm not sure what the title is, but this very question was asked, and we discuss it in a bit of depth, and there's actually a good conversation surrounding it.
Let's see. Somebody says, Kunal says, I'm 17, started cycling this year, FTP of 226 and weight of 67 kilograms. I'll be applying to UC Davis for next year. I want to jump right into the California crit scene. Any tips from Pete?
Ooh.
Yeah. California crit scene.
Yeah. I started racing collegiate, so I think definitely race collegiate bikes for UC Davis, and you'll get a lot more crit racing experience before jumping into the crit racing scene, if that makes sense.
I did the exact same thing. I started crit racing at the collegiate level.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And everybody's a little nicer. Everybody is a little safer might be the wrong word.
Yeah. They're not trying to chop your head off.
Yeah, nobody's trying
it's
to.
It's not ruthless.
It's not as ruthless as the normal crit scene in California.
Yeah.
The best part about crits is I think you can learn something every time. So every single time you race, pay attention to what you're doing, what other people are doing, what's working, what's not working, and think about it, right? I think the best part about crits is you can just outthink people, especially like 226 and 67 kilos is not bad. I mean, that's enough to play the game for sure.
No, I remember I think my first crit was at UC Davis with the University of Nevada Reno team. And I was in the Ds because they do ABCD. Yeah. So I'd start in Ds. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I take away from that criterion, which still sticks with me, is I was sprinting for third. First and second were already locked up. And I sprinted around the guy into the wind.
Yeah.
So that's something I'll never do again. That one time my coach said, well, you probably would have gotten that guy, but you jumped into the wind.
Yep.
So there's my first criterion, my first learning experience.
Yeah. It's pretty much you check a box every time. Every time you'll do something and you go, I shouldn't have done that, or I'm glad I did that. And then you just recycle all these things over and over again. And luckily there's thousands of decisions to be made every race. So you'll have lots of
You're going to get some of them wrong every time.
But yeah, do as many as you can. Don't be scared. Race hard. It's not about winning. It's about figuring out who you are as a racer. Race as much as you can, especially at the beginning. When you're fresh, when you're 17, I don't want to burn you out, but you could race all year long.
A ton.
Totally.
Yeah.
Something that's pretty cool. Kunal, the person, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. He's in India right now, and he's going to UC Davis.
That's right.
Congrats, man, on that. That's going to be pretty cool.
Definitely come say hi.
Yeah,
if
you
see
should.
Me around. I'm always happy to chat. Hopefully, I'll be at those crits also. So
yeah. And you're not too far. I'm sure that you'll actually probably be up closer to our region, so you're not too far from Trainer Road HQ. We have a couple questions about weight loss, and then I think we'll probably call it at that today. But let's see. So on the weight loss side, the question mainly is like losing weight while training. We've talked about this a lot, and if you can Google search this and say Trainer Road Podcast weight loss, then it'll probably pull up all the episodes on SoundCloud that you've seen there. But it can be really difficult as intensity increases. You really need to be fueling those workouts, and that should be a priority so you don't miss out on the work.
Yeah, so the hang up I get is that people think base training is the time. If I'm going to lose weight on the bike, I'm going to do it during base training. And that might apply to traditional base training, but when it comes to sweet spot, you have to fuel for those workouts. You're not going to be able to do them otherwise. No, I don't care how aerobically fit you are as a rider, you're going to burn some sugar. And if you're depriving yourself of sugar or carbohydrate, it's just so you can, lose some weight while getting faster. Those two things will not happen at the same time if it's sweet spot work. Once you want that's about the breaking point. You might be able to do tempo workout on very little in terms of intake and actually shed a bit of fat in the process. But once you broach sweet spot and you're in that, 80, 85% or higher sort of area, you have to start fueling for those, especially as they become, longer intervals and more demanding workouts.
Yeah, it gets really tough. The one thing that I know and I know people may have plans to drop a bunch of weight, but the one thing that I found is that if I make sure that I'm doing the work to the capacity that I can, and I'm fueling that work
adequately, but not overly so.
Exactly. And then, I cut out small indulgences, right? Like you've mentioned before, you cut out the beer and the ice cream, right? The bookends. And if I cut that stuff out, then I notice that I reach what I deem personally an ideal weight, right? I may not be super light.
That is exactly the second point I wanted to make. With sweet spot work in particular, I don't look at my diet all that closely, and the weight loss just takes place. If I'm just what Jonathan described, if I'm fueling appropriately but not overdoing it, the just the intensity and the burn rate, if you will, of sweet spot work handles it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's one other thing, depending on how experienced you are, if you've have multiple years of riding and you want to add 30 minutes here and there of really low intensity to not to lop off 300 calories. Like if I do it twice a week and burn an extra 500 calories with zero work, as my active recovery, I'm talking 40-30%, like less than 200, or for me, less than 200 watts, like 150 watts, just noodling.
Yes.
If I do that for 6 weeks, like I'll lose a few pounds with no other changes.
Yep.
And those pounds will be fat, plain and simple.
Yep. Yeah. It works pretty well.
But if you're already on the edge, that's enough to push you over for sure.
Yep.
So definitely that's for people who aren't riding enough. You're like, man, I wish I could ride more, but I can fit in 30 minutes of nothing right now. That's okay. That'll take some weight off too.
Yeah. Again, if it's low intensity, you can get away with basically no caloric intake.
Totally. Somebody is asking, can you make drill and sprint technique videos in the forum? Yeah, we'll do that.
Let's try one.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then the final one that somebody asked here, and this is in the forum, says, any tips or tricks for tapering or preparing for 11 days of crit racing? Next year, my goal is to complete a tour of America's Dairyland and hopefully doing all 11 races. And, but I guess before we aren't going to answer this one in depth, so I'm going to push you over to different times we've talked about stage races in general, because the main key with this is really talking about nutrition back-to-back and making sure that you're keeping up on their post-race recovery, right?
Yeah, I'll say one thing too is come into Tour of America's Dairyland undertrained a little bit and alternate priority races. So figure out the courses that are more suited to you. Even if you're completing one like Schlitz Park, for example, is so hard. And either that's your best race, or you're probably there's two types of riders. That's a great chance for some success, or it's a time where you're going to do as little work as possible. A lot of the four corner races, tell yourself you're going to sit in for the first half of the race. Don't do anything for the first half. And kind of picking and choosing your battles over 11 days, you're going to raise your chances for success. You don't just hit every race as hard as you can. By the end, there won't be any chances for success. And people get tired. So if you start feeling better and better, which some people do, you're going to start realizing that other people aren't racing to the same capabilities they were earlier in the week. And a lot of people leave and a lot of new fresh faces show up in the second half. So each day is different, and kind of think about whether that's a successful day for you or not and plan accordingly.
Awesome.
Good advice.
Nice job, Pete. Way to close her out.
Quick and concise.
Yeah, way to close her out. For everybody racing this week or getting ready to race in Kona, good luck and safe travels over there. We'll see you there. For all of you podcasters, and for those that are racing the Oz Trails in Bentonville, plenty of you as well in Bentonville, Arkansas. Good luck at that one. And for all of you that are going to be in Kona, remember, head over to the forum. We have a post that's pinned where you can get the information on everything that we're doing there, and stay tuned for all the podcasts coming up. We'll not see you live next week, but we will have tons of podcast content for you, and it'll all be posted in the forum too. So stay tuned, and we'll see you all then.
Thanks again.
Bye, guys.